Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. With me today on Writers at Work is Kevin Wade, best known for his work on the police drama Blue Bloods, where he served as writer, showrunner, and executive producer. The show ran for 14 seasons on CBS. Prior to that, Kevin wrote or co-wrote such feature films as Working Girl, Mr. Baseball, Meet Joe Black, and Maid in Manhattan, and polished the script for the James Bond film GoldenEye, among others. His play Key Exchange was produced off-Broadway back in 1981. He's been honing his craft for a good long while. In 2025, Kevin published his first novel, Johnny Careless, featuring Jeep Mullane, police chief in Bayville, Long Island, who was once an NYPD detective. When the body of a childhood friend washes up on a beach, blue-collar Mullane does battle with the victim's wealthy family and the man's ex-wife while he works the case. It's a gritty tale that calls to mind the great cop-out-of-water tales that raised high the bar for crime fiction. Kevin's Johnny Careless was nominated for a Mystery Writers of America Edgar Award for Best First Novel. Another Jeep Mullane novel, One Good Eye, arrives in August. What happens when a screenwriter and playwright decides to try his hand at writing a novel? How must he adapt to meet the reader's rather than the viewer's needs? Who better than Kevin Wade to tell us? Kevin Wade, welcome to Writers at Work.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Kevin, before we get into the nitty-gritty, why did you decide to write a novel?
Uh, Practically speaking, I was towards the end of a 14-year run on a network television show, and so very used to writing 6, 7 days a week. And when the Writers Guild strike happened in 2024, I think it was, that clock was still running. So a little ways into the strike, I thought, well, I'd like to do something. I'd always wanted to write a novel, and so there was really no barrier to entry. I had nothing but time on my hands, and so I just sat down and started. But to be fair, going back to when I was a kid or in my early 20s, the stuff that was most provocative and compelling and inspiring to me was mystery novels, frankly, starting with Raymond Chandler and certainly blowing up when I discovered John D. MacDonald and Travis McGee and Lou Archer and a bunch of others. I had some background as a bad actor, so my writing debut was actually an off-Broadway play. But I remember, and I was looking at it, the protagonist of the play, it was called Key Exchange, is a paperback mystery writer. And as all first plays or first anythings, the protagonist is usually a stand-in for the author. So when I looked back, I thought, well, you wanted to do this 45 years ago. So I tried it.
Did it feel right for you from the start? That is, did you see that you could transfer your talents to the novel form?
That's a great question, and I think the honest answer is no. I was incredibly daunted, if that's a word, by 70,000 words. I'd written stage plays and screenplays and teleplays for a long, long time, and that's about I don't know, an eighth or a tenth of the word count. And the other thing was that I'd been a collaborative writer for all those years. There was a director, there was a casting director, a locations guy, whatever it was, a whole army of talented colleagues. And it took me a couple of weeks to realize, okay, you've sat with all these folks, you've watched them do what they do, and most of them were very good at it. Now you have all their jobs. And so once I said, well, you're director, casting, hair, makeup, wardrobe, locations, budgets, it freed me up to do whatever it was I did in the first novel.
So what was your process? How did the process develop into one where you felt comfortable writing as a novelist?
Well, I had an I'd lived in this area for 25 years, the North Shore of Long Island, and it seemed to me early on, not thinking about writing about it, but that it was I think 100 years since The Great Gatsby was published, and the dynamic was very much the same. There were the ruling moneyed classes, the service classes. They met every day, but they had their own tribal rules and customs and everything to keep everybody in their exalted or lowly place. And I thought, well, put a cop in the middle of that, and there's a story there, or there's a story engine there anyway. So it really started with a version of writing what you know.
Yeah, I want to get back to setting, but a couple other questions.
Yeah.
Were there any habits that you had to break? I mean, did you find yourself on a page intuitively doing something that you might have done in a screenplay and then say, well, this doesn't work?
That's yes, less dialogue, please. Because everything I'd ever written was a sentence or two, a slug line of setting, location, time of day, and who's there, who's talking to who, and then the rest of it's dialogue. And obviously, or for the most part, in a novel, as I said, doing all those jobs. What's the room look like? What's the day? What's the weather outside? What is so and so wearing? So all those things that were usually not in the screenplay or teleplay or even stage play had to be provided by me to the reader. So it became a matter of not relying on dialogue, which I obviously relied on for 40 odd years. So that was the thing that seemed to sort of come up first.
Yeah, I must say that you did a wonderful job with setting, and I was so impressed knowing your background because either intuitively or deliberately you understood that setting is just not physicality.
Right.
Uh, for example, you use weather quite well. Um, you use attitude quite well. You know, the sort of characteristics of the people, both friendly to Jeep and antagonistic to Jeep, come from their upbringing.
Yes.
You know, their attitudes are really reflective of the setting in which they were raised. And as you say, that's quite a different type of writing than having the ability to point the camera and having a grip play with the lights.
And I think that, I've watched an awful lot of movies and television over my life, but I've read a lot of books, and everything you've just described, and thank you, I'll take it as a compliment, comes from John D. McDonald's Florida, Carl Hyacint's Florida, Dennis Lehane and Robert B. Parker's Boston, and on and on and on. It seemed to me that they were using the locale and the population as a very important major character in all those books.
Yes, agreed, agreed. Um, there's a sort of question I'm just curious about for my own head. Um, in Blue Bloods, for example, you had the late Mark Snow to compose
Yes.
underscoring. And as we all know, in the novel, we can heighten tension or better illuminate characters through the use of music. In your job as a showrunner, and we're getting off the novel for a minute here.
Sure,
When
sure.
when did you decide to have Mark write or submit a certain piece of music to improve the viewer experience?
Um, I for most of the run of the show, I was given kind of free rein in the editing room, and then give me an inch and I'll take a mile. I loved sitting with Mark and going. He would do a temp score, and we'd screen it together. It was just what you were describing, like, okay, a little less of this, a little more of this, and so it became a great fun to be scoring with him. And if you've got a car pulling up and two cops jumping out and running into a building, something anyone who watches television has seen a million times. You got to do something else with it. And Mark, with a long, long career in kind of suspense-oriented television, could come up with some very inventive stuff. So I used him, probably overused him, because he was so good at it.
Yeah, I wonder if I mean, as a writer, um, it's the ninth inning and your back is against the wall and you're saying, "Oh, Mark, please make this better."
Yes, yeah, yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, if you've ever sat down and I take your favorite movie or your favorite episode of television and watch it without music,
Oh
and
yeah,
you'll learn it in 90 seconds how important music is.
yeah.
Underscoring mood, teeing up something, subverting something, surprising with something. It's very, very, very important.
Yeah. I'll note that you attempt to insert music in a few places in Johnny Careless, and
Yeah.
you have a fondness for Warren Zevon.
Yep.
And you know Warren was a big fan of the kind of mysteries that he would have loved this book, by the way.
Thank you. I do know he was a big fan of mysteries, and it often, lawyers, guns, and money could have been a Raymond Chandler title,
Right,
and
right.
any number of other Werewolves of London for that matter. I mean, he was just great, very literate writer.
Yeah. There was a bookstore in Westwood, California called the Mystery Bookstore.
Yeah.
And he would go in there and they would fill up a box with books for him.
Yeah.
And so he would have appreciated this.
He was a
Uh,
cool cat. When we were doing Blue Bloods, we had an episode. I forget the exact things, but Warren at the end of his days covered "Knocking on Heaven's Door," Dylan's song,
yeah.
and I reached out and found a way to his son, who was at that point licensing his music to be used in film and television and elsewhere. And he gave it to us. We bought it, we played it, and I got a very nice note from him saying my dad would have loved what you did with that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it
Isn't that
was a
great?
high point.
Yeah. So anyway, so here we are now. What are the advantages of the novel versus the screenplay? We've talked about what the advantages of the screenplay versus the novel is, but are the advantages of the novel versus the screenplay?
Again, I'll be just purely honest and pragmatic. You're your own boss. While a good editor or publisher is going to give you notes, they're not the kind of invasive notes, or I don't want to say invasive, overload of notes that you generally get from movie and television studios. So it's nice to be flying without the instruments, as I was as a rookie novelist. And that meant a lot to me, I guess, after all those years. Just being my own boss, making my own decisions, and then having to stand by them. And eventually, you can win them. In other places, you get fired. If you have a book deal, generally, they don't fire you off your own novel.
Have you coped with, yeah, it's probably too early in your career as a novelist, but there's a certain aspect of loneliness to being a novelist.
God, yeah.
And some writer friends and I talk about that people often talk about what traits you need to be a successful novelist, and one of which is the ability to work alone.
Well, yes, though to be fair, the life of a screenwriter, a movie writer, is incredibly lonely. The audience you're writing for, unless or until the movie is made, is about five people. And you send them a draft that you worked on for 4 or 6 months, and they take a couple of months to get back to you. And it's great practice for being a novelist because, listen, I was very lucky. I think I had 6 or 7 movies produced, and that's probably out of 15 or 16 screenplays that I wrote. Um, and so you can easily you can be doing very well to spend 3, 4, even 5 years between movies getting made. And those 3, 4, or 5 years were writing full time for an audience of 4 or 5 people.
Right.
So you ate that. Now, mind you, you were paid for it, and if you were doing well in Hollywood, what I'll call CAA retail salary is very, very good. So you're not in a garret like a starving artist waiting for a hit. You are making a living, but it's very lonely. So I was used to it by the time I sat down to write a novel.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess I hadn't. thought about it that way. Yes, I mean, I have this image of a writer's room and lots of people collaborating, but of course, at some point in film and on stage, you are alone.
Film and stage, you are absolutely alone, and television, you are not alone. But I never quite understood, and so because I didn't understand, I didn't enforce it. The idea of a writer's room of 7 or 8 or 10 people sitting around a table, nobody writing, everybody just talking and pitching ideas. I know it works for a lot of shows and certainly for comedy, but when I tried it at Blue Bloods, I was terrible at it, and I had chosen people who didn't want to do it either. They wanted to say, here's a story I want to write. Let me go off in a room and write it, and I'll bring it to you in a couple of weeks. And that seemed to work. It seems to me that whether you like it or not, if you want to be a writer, you got to be prepared to go sit alone in a room and make stuff up. I
Yeah.
think that goes for writers and institutionalized crazy people, because that's the job description.
So let's get back to Johnny Careless. Uh, one you use really well the tension between the haves and I'll say the have less, the haves and
Mhm.
less.
Yeah.
Um, and it may be a familiar trope in crime fiction, but in your story, we really don't know who to trust. Um, and I'm sure you're fond of Jeep, but
Yeah.
he's compromised
Yeah.
to an extent by his relationship with the family of the victim, who Johnny Chameless, who AKA Johnny Careless, and the victim's ex-wife keeps turning up at or near Jeep's home.
Yep.
When you were developing Jeep, what traits did you want him to have?
Hmm. Uh, that's a good question. I don't know. I didn't outline him. I didn't consciously give him a top 5 characteristics. I think I wanted him to be, or in my sense, I always find the kid in the back of the class, uh, passing notes or kind of asides, and not a disruptor, but kind of a commenter. And I felt that that's what he was, that he lived his life. He lives in the present, and as a good police officer, you have to immediately deal with what's coming at you. But he had, I'm going to say, the emotional intelligence or innate sense of humor to also be able to walk around in his life, keeping it at arm's length. So
Yeah.
there's that duality of someone who is completely present and the protagonist and drives the action or reacts to the action that comes at him, but also can look at the audience and say, "Here's what I think about what's going on."
Yeah. I want to tread lightly because I don't want to ruin anything for the readers. Um, you use a device of in the early in the book flashbacks,
Yeah,
and that is very effective in letting us know that um, that Jeep doesn't know some of the things that have influenced his life, or he finds out about them um, not haphazardly, but almost in passing.
yeah.
That there's a hidden hand guiding him. When did you come up with that idea of flashback chapters?
Uh, Again, pragmatically and being, not to leave this room, I didn't think I had enough plot to do the whole thing in present day, to have it go hour after hour, day after day. I knew that that a case like that, which was already a cold case, was not going to grab and keep the reader's interest if I tried to do 250 or 300 pages just in the present day, given that plot. It was a cold case.
Yeah.
So I thought there's a trope in dramatic writing called character driven. And it's what I tried to do for most of my life. So I thought, if this is going to work, if I ask you to carry about a guy who, and I'm not spoiling it, washes up dead on page 3, and you've got hundreds of pages to go, that's a hard hill to climb. If I design it in such a way that you watch the relationship between the protagonist and his dead friend grow over 25 years, maybe I can get you involved in it and get you involved in why the protagonist is so torn up about this.
Yeah. I love that type of inventiveness in first novels, um, because when this was certainly my experience, and there's certain aspects of writing your first novel that you simply don't know how to do.
Yeah.
And for example, in my case, I had no idea how to handle backstory,
Yeah.
so I gave the character a diary, and we reprinted pages of his diary in order to give backstory. Um, and there's just something about that creative aspect of the writer where maybe lay readers don't think this way, but as a writer, when I'm reading a first novel, I think, oh, that was a very clever way to deal with this new situation.
I think like my flashbacks, like your diary, is that necessity was the mother of that
Yes.
particular invention.
Yeah.
It's like, what's in the toolbox that I can use?
But of course, you could have just done nothing,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
have a bad story.
Yeah, but it was also, again, it was managing to get to 250 pages or whatever the minimum was. I was like, all right, this is not a novella. It's not a chapbook of poetry. It's got to be at least a paperback novel that you cram in your back pocket.
Yeah. What something I liked about Jeep is that he's in the dark sometimes,
Yeah.
but he's never dumb. You know, he he's there's a conspiracy of fate to befuddle him,
Yeah.
but he never succumbs to it. He's a very willful character.
I think one of the mechanics of that, and I'm sure it's from veteran mystery writers know how to do it, and screenwriting, you have to do it. If you've got, let's say, a cop and he's approaching a door, and the door is locked, but he knows someone's on the other side, or he thinks he does, he doesn't know it. You don't cut to the other side of the door and tell the audience something that the cop doesn't know. If you cut and there's a bad guy with a mask and an axe there, the audience is ahead of the protagonist. So when you have the opportunity to lead the audience and put them in the same shoes as the protagonist and go, what's he thinking? What's going to happen? How's he going to react to what happens? Then I think you can keep the audience with you.
Yeah. Uh, tell me a little bit about the Nevin, the ex-wife of
Yeah.
um, I don't find her to be your standard off the shelf uh, femme fatale. And I really liked it whenever she turned up.
Yeah, there are, she was, I wouldn't say a composite of people I know around here, but there is a certain, I'll say kind of American woman who probably is famously in some Beverly Hills or this place or Dallas and Back Bay, Boston, but a certain kind of upbringing and knows all the right moves, went to all the right schools, wears all the right clothes, all the way down the line. And they're all so smart. And so when you get to like crack them open and go, what do you really think? And they come out with surprising stuff, I find it very compelling. And
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be, by the way, rich or poor or haves or have less. It's just a kind of person who walks around in the world with great certainty and great confidence in her ability to charm, to have her way, etc. And then when you crack it open and she's as insecure as you are, I think audiences, that's a nice surprise.
yeah. There's always that girl when we were in school that was unreachable in some way. She would never go out with us.
Yes,
And then
yes. I have dozens of them to this day. Yes.
and then somehow you have a conversation with her in passing and you realize, wait a second, she's a person.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is a delicate subject. Again, I don't want to spoil it for the reader, but
Yeah.
family plays a lot of roles in this book.
Yeah.
And there's a twist involving family. I don't know how we can discuss the twist without revealing it, but let me ask you, when did the twist come to mind for you? Was it fundamental to the development of story, or did it like
The
spring up and did you think, oh, I should do this?
I think I'm gonna tread lightly also and say I think you're talking about the revelation of a prodigal son, shall we say? Someone
Yes.
who, yes, no, I had no idea what I was going to do with
Wow.
that guy. And so there was a
Wow.
day, I'm going to say halfway, two-thirds of the way through writing this when I went, oh, if I just make them this, if I just cross these wires, no one will see it coming, but it won't feel like a cheat. So that was a gift from whoever the gods or the muses are that
Wow.
I was laying in something. I just didn't know where the track ended up.
Yeah. Oh, it's very effective. In fact, there's a moment that a wonderful thing that you do where with a piece of, I think it's ciabatta bread. Was it ciabatta bread?
Ciabatta bread,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And it's so clearly delineated the behavior of the class.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's enough. I don't want to ruin it for the reader. Did you always know how the Johnny Careless case would be resolved?
Not really. No. Again, to answer your question in a medium form, screenwriting, television writing, and to a lesser extent, playwriting are all pretty heavily reliant on outline, because you do need to know every peak and valley and all that, or you're going to get lost, especially in the middle. I sat down, and this was a lark. I didn't have a book contract. I didn't have anything. I was just thought, I'll try a novel. I got a lot of free time. And so I think I outlined the first 7 or 8 scenes so that I knew I was going to be present day, past day with a certain rhythm to it. And then I just sort of went from there. So a lot of it, I didn't know where it was going. I would love to sit. I love the idea that, like Elmore Leonard said, well, why would I outline it? The characters tell me what the story is. Well,
Uh,
that sounds very fancy for a rookie writer. But if you like your characters and you're investing some of yourself in them, they do tell you things that you couldn't have known.
yeah. So you didn't have a deadline,
No,
right? But now you have a deadline with your second novel,
I did. It comes out in August, so I had a
right?
very hard deadline for them to make the release date they wanted. Yes.
Yeah. The reason I'm putting in a preamble to a
Yeah.
question, in my novel, The Price You Pay, um, the book ends with someone knocking on the door and the protagonist opening the door. And I can tell you that until he opened that door, I didn't know who was on the other side of it.
Uh-huh.
But I had to finish the book because of the
Hmm.
deadline. Um,
And so you surprised yourself, which means you probably surprised your readers.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope so. So now you don't have that sort of leisure time to let the Johnny Careless story go where it's going to go. Now you've got to direct it because you've
Yeah.
got to meet that deadline. How'd you feel about that?
I didn't mind it because I was used to deadlines, and frankly, I was very flattered and kind of shining my buttons that they wanted a second book before the first one that was released. And I did way more outlining for the second one, but I didn't do enough. And so I got kind of stuck in the middle and panicked some, and then realized I was stuck because a major plot thing just didn't work. So I threw it out, invented another one, worked double time, and managed to meet the deadline. But it was pretty, I guess I know always had fear that if people liked the first one, if people bought tickets or changed the channel to it, the second one was daunting because you go, am I going to remember what I did the first time? Or am I going to make all the mistakes I didn't make the first time and the second time? So there was a lot of that kind of bouillabaisse going on.
Yeah.
But I managed to get there, I guess.
I wonder what proportion of second novels fail. We know in rock that there's a lot of terrible second albums.
Yep.
But I just wonder how many. I'm trying to think at the top of my head. I can't think of a major debut that had an awful sequel. May,
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
asked the listeners of Writers at Work, if you can think of one, drop me a line. So I guess what we're saying is that your skills translated.
I think I was able to take my little toolbox into the factory next door, and I had enough, and I knew what the problems would be. I mean, listen, there's a huge problem, not problem, but challenge for a someone who's written plays and movies and television. You were always writing for actors. Now, if you've got a handsome, dashing leading man and a beautiful, witty woman with erotic chemistry going on between them, that's doing a lot of work for you. If you've got to try to convince the reader of that on the page without the beautiful movie star or whatever, that's a real challenge. So that was one thing that I was very aware of from the start, but just thought, be disciplined about it. You've read hundreds, if not thousands, of these kind of books. How do people do it? And stuck to that.
Yeah. Um, I hate the word I'm going to use, but um, was One Good Eye easier to write?
No, it was harder. Much,
Please tell
much
us
harder.
why.
Much harder because the first one, it was just, it was I'm not going to say a lark. It was work, but it was work I was enjoying. And I was saying, I always wanted to do this, I think. So let me try doing it. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being my own boss every single day and the boss of the world that I was creating. The second one, just by definition, I had a contract for it. There was a set of expectations, and the first one, Johnny Careless, got some very, very kind reviews, especially for a debut novel. So all of a sudden there was a bar that wasn't there before, that I didn't feel I had to jump over, but I wanted if people liked the first one, I wanted them to enjoy the second one as well. So there was that.
So we have One Good Eye coming in August.
Yeah.
What's next for you, Kevin?
Uh, you know, not to leave this room. I'm 72 years old. I've been doing this. Come next week, it'll be exactly 45 years since a little off-Broadway play called Key Exchange debuted. And I got to call up a bar in Soho and tell them that I wouldn't be coming in for the brunch shift because I had a job as a playwright.
Uh,
So 45 years later, I feel like I'm not going to make an Irish exit, but if One Good Eye sells enough that they want another one, I would love to do that. And if it doesn't, I really don't know what I'll do, but I don't have any plans right now. And it's been a long time since I didn't have plans, and it kind of feels removing some of the friction in life sometimes isn't a bad idea at certain stages.
I've been speaking with Kevin Wade, much honored playwright, screenwriter, producer, and TV executive, whose debut novel, Johnny Careless, calls to mind, as Carl Hyacin said, the novels of Robert B. Parker and Donald Westlake. His next Jeep Mullane novel arrives in August. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me on Writers at Work.
Pleasure to be with you, Jim. Thank you, man.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.